Hi everyone. Last time we talked about effective actions and how they can be thought of as essentially a Venn diagram with a hole punched out. So you might have S3 star as the inclusion, and you might have S3 get star as one of the exclusions. And that would mean that the effective action includes everything in the green section, so S3 star, except for S3 get star. And today I'd like to talk about effective conditions, as they vary quite significantly from how effective actions work. And before we do, I'll just briefly run through effective resources, because they work in a very similar fashion to effective actions. They can similarly be thought of as Venn diagrams with a hole punched out. So here, for example, you can see that we've got an effective resource that is an ARN of a bucket, and it includes all of the objects in the bucket apart from the objects with a particular subpath. Similarly, with effective principal, you can have an effective principal that includes all roles for a specific account, except for one specific role, or a wildcard, or any subset of the main inclusion. Effective conditions are different because they have multiple inclusions, as whenever you create an AWS policy, you have the option to provide multiple conditions. And those conditions apply to every combination of action, resource, and principle. And where PolicyShards are split up with individual actions, resources, and principles, those must include every condition that exists on the original statement. Despite this, you can still think of them in very much the same way. Effective conditions represent scenarios from the possible set of conditions that are allowed. If you think of the white space in this slide as the possible conditions that might exist in AWS, all possible combinations of values, operators, and keys, then we're essentially including two specific conditions that must be fulfilled. And similarly, we may want to exclude specific scenarios. So in the inclusion of effective condition, we're indicating which conditions must be true, whereas in the exclusions, we're indicating conditions which must not be true. So for the PolicyShard to apply with an effective condition like this, the AWS source account must not string equals this account ID. And the AWS source IP must not be this IP address. And what normally happens is what we see here, is that the two exclusions get flipped into inclusions by reversing the operator. This happens automatically when you create an effective condition object. These are both now inclusions, i.e. conditions which must be true for the PolicyShard to apply with this effective condition. And it means the same thing, but is ultimately much easier to understand, because now we're saying that for the PolicyShard to apply, all four of these conditions must be true, that the AWS source account string not equals that account ID, and the AWS source IP is not that IP address. And if you want to know which operators can be flipped like this, you can have a look at the source code for PolicyGlass or the documentation itself. Any operator that does not appear on this operator reversal index will not be flipped. And usually that means that the operator does not have an opposite. For example, there is no not binary equals operator, which means that any condition that contains binary equals as its operator in, for example, deny statement, that will probably end up as an exclusion on the allow shard in the effective condition. And that's it for our introduction to effective conditions. Thank you for watching. See you next time.